it's time for more planting. Now I admit that I am having a really hard time this year. I just am absolutely chomping at the bit for it to be really spring. And we're sort of spring. We've melted all our snow off, and I did get a few things started last weekend, and I have onion sets in the ground, and we're starting a straw bale garden, but it is still time for me to plant more seeds. Now, this year my emphasis is on trying to, as an experiment, follow the rules. Now that may sound funny, but usually, partially due to my work schedule, I wind up just sort of planting everything at once and somehow making it work. And this year I actually sat there with the individual seed packets and the instructions that are in the various seed catalogs, and I decided I would try very hard to see if I could follow exactly what their rules were pretty closely and see if it made any difference. Now, the only thing I could see that it might make a difference with so far is that it may make it easier to have enough room in here, but I'm not convinced yet. So we're going to see whether it really makes a big difference. We prefer to have rather large plants go out into the garden because we have so many things that want to eat our plants, and the environment can be a bit rough in terms of temperature swings and all kinds of other things. So we feel like having bigger plants when they go out gives them a much bigger chance of surviving. And I frequently will pot a lot of my plants up into much larger pots like this, and sometimes even slightly larger than that. Now, last week I did a ton of flowers, some lettuces, leeks, and onions. Today I'm going to do flowers and tomatoes. So let's get started with that. There we go. There we go. I need to fill up a couple of those a little bit more. The ones down here are just a little too shallow. So we'll fix that. And you did see I tapped the dirt in. So I don't want it too loose. I don't want it crammed in there, but I don't want it too loose either. So it's tapped lightly in. There we go. That'll do. Now, I have multiple charts inside. Now, that may sound a little obsessive, but we're experimenting a lot this year. And one of the things we've been playing with all winter is we have some tomato starts in the kitchen that we've been cloning. Now, I have to admit, I'm really looking forward to getting that part of my kitchen back this spring sometime. But for now, it means that we have some tomato plants that can be turned, well, tomatoes that can be turned into tomato plants. And I've already figured out how many plants those tomatoes should produce. So what I want to do is supplement that with newly seeded tomatoes. And I have my little list here of the types of tomatoes I want to plant, and I have my seeds. This is a new one for us. We got this through a recommendation from Swedish Homestead. It's a black cherry tomato, and it's not supposed to be, when we think of cherry tomatoes, we tend to think of something small like that. These are supposed to actually be bigger. He grows this extensively in his greenhouse. Pretty much all tomatoes in Sweden, at least in the area he lives in, has to be grown in a greenhouse environment because their season is too short. We don't have that problem here, but we still want to play with it, and we want to make sure that we definitely have some of them this fall, because he says they're very hardy and tolerant of cold and swings and things like that. So what we want to be able to do is grow them this fall for sure. But we're going to start by growing them as seeds this spring. I'm going to just start by putting in one label for each row. I'm going to do one row of black cherry. Now this is a special pen. It's called a garden marker. Regular magic markers will fade if you use them on your labels. And there's very few things that are more frustrating than sitting there going, okay, I can't read the label anymore. So that's going to be the black cherry row here. So let's get started with that. This is interesting. It says, now it's in Swedish, but I could tell by the dates on here that it's saying that you should use it before September of 2020. Now, most of the seeds we buy in the U.S., they tell you to use them the same year, but here they're saying you've got a couple of years that it should still work for you. That's interesting. I have a translation in here. Yeah. Okay. They don't tell us what their percentage of germination is here. Ah, here we go. A cool little thing. Haven't seen one of these in a while. I remember years ago a lot of our seeds used to come in these. It's just a little foil package to keep them completely fresh. So about 1/4 inch. Okay, one more. There we go. A Granadero we have never grown before. It is a hybrid. It's a paste plum Roma tomatoes. Well, for years I've grown some sort of Roma and usually a San Marzano or something like that too. So this is what I'm growing this year. I decided that the last couple of years some of our things just haven't worked that well, so I was going to replace them with a slightly new variety and see if that helped. But I still needed the same sort of a thing because I use it to make tomato sauce and tomato paste. Okay, Pisano. Now, these are designed for greenhouse use. They're a Roma San Marzano type. It's supposed to be extremely productive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant 5 of these little guys. Okay, Pisano. Yeah, it was very interesting. I spent hours looking at catalogs this winter, looking for plants that were not particularly susceptible to blossom end rot, because that's a huge problem here, and just trying to come up with some solutions or potential solutions. They may not work. It's worth a try. New labels. Okay, next is Big Beef. We're going to grow 2 of those. Big Beef is a new one for me. It is a Beef Master. But it is an F1. And the reason it is an F1 is I am trying to eliminate some of the possible issues by choosing plants that are naturally resistant to some of the diseases that may or may not exist here. I don't even know. But I'm experimenting. If this does the trick in terms of solving some of my problems, awesome. I will also have some Beef Master as live plants. So they're all in the Beef Master family, so we'll see what happens. There's 1. And there's 2. I tried this one last year, and honestly, I'm not sure what happened. It's called Defiant, and it comes with very high recommendations, but I actually did not have any plants that survived to go out in the garden. It seemed like it was just a fluke last year. I have no idea. I've never lost an entire crop like that before. They come very highly recommended, but obviously if none of them survive to get out to the garden, I can't exactly know how good they are. So you have 3 Defiants here. Then we need Gardener's Delight Red Cherry. Now this was a truly awesome plant last year. This thing produced a gazillion, I know that's not a technical term, tiny little red cherry tomatoes. But you know, the cherry tomatoes in the grocery store, a lot of times they taste kind of like, oh, I don't know, little red balls of some sort. And these were so good. So good. They were tasty enough. And what I like to do is I like to grow cherries that are tasty enough that if I have a billion of them and I'm making sauce, I can just throw them in the sauce. They'll blend right in with all the other wonderful flavors and it won't be a problem. So, yeah. That was this guy last year. I had never grown this one before. I've grown a lot of cherry tomatoes over the years. So tasty. Very prolific. They continued to produce until everything froze to death at the end of the season. Okay. There we go. Now, that is actually all of the tomatoes that I plan to plant today. Because the climate is, this winter,